All right. Good evening. To continue our Common Core standards, the new ones that we have, not only do we have multiplying fractions, but we have dividing fractions. This is a little bit different, so I'm going to try to explain it as best I can to help you understand it. Dividing fractions, the main VIC, or the very important concept to think of, is when you divide fractions, you turn the fraction upside down and then just multiply. Okay, you might be thinking, I don't understand what that means. I'll explain it. All right? One thing that we need to know, a vocabulary word that's very important, and this is a word you've probably not seen before, reciprocal. The reciprocal of a fraction is its upside down form. An example, if I wanted to know the reciprocal of 2/8, I would flip it. I would turn it upside down, and it's 8 seconds. The reciprocal of 3/4 would be 4/3. That's the reciprocal. Now, here's an example of dividing some fractions. Here's an example. 1/2 divided by 1/6. What you're going to do is you're going to take the second fraction, not the first, but the second, and you're going to turn it upside down. That is its reciprocal. And then you're going to multiply. You're thinking, but I'm supposed to be dividing. I know. I'll explain that in a minute. So 1/2 divided by 1/6. You're going to keep the 1/2 as normal. You're going to multiply. You're going to change it and do the opposite. And then you're going to flip this upside down. You're going to make its reciprocal. And it's going to be, instead of 1/6, 6/1. And then you're going to multiply like normal. 1 times 6 is 6. 2 times 1 is 2. I'm going to simplify it. If I simplify it, I get 3. And you might say, how'd you get 3 from that? Remember, fractions can be divided. So this is 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2. 2 can go into 6 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. So that's why 6/2 simplified is 3. There it is. Now, you might be thinking, so how does this work? I don't understand how you're supposed to be dividing, but you're multiplying? It's reciprocals? What's that? Well, instead of thinking, what is 1/2 divided by 1/6, think of it in a different way. Think, how many 1/6 could there be in a half? All right, well, let's model it with a pie or pizza or whatever you want to call it. Let's say that there are 6 parts. Here is 1/6. How many 1/6 pieces could fit inside an entire half of a pie? How many 6 are in a half? Well, if you look at it, you will see that there's 1, 2, 3, 6 that are in a half of a pie. And that's why a minute ago when we said, how could 6/2 be 3? This is another way of looking at it visually. All right. So 1/6, there's 3 1/6 pieces in half. There's 3. So it might be a different way of thinking of it. That kind of seems to help me if I think of it like that instead of, well, what is this divided by that? Here's another example. 1/8 divided by 1/4. All right, so I'm going to write the first fraction like I typically would, 1/8, but I'm going to now change this. I'm going to reverse the division to multiplication, and I'm going to make the reciprocal of 1/4, which is 4/1. And now I'm going to multiply. 1 times 4 is 4. 8 times 1 is 8. I'm going to simplify it. 4 and 8 can both be divided by 4, and so that is 1/2. Okay. Now, in other words, if you're thinking, I just don't get how you get this. Draw a model. In other words, how many fourths are there in an eighth? Okay, draw your pie or your pizza or your brownies or whatever. This section right here is a fourth. This is an eighth. How many fourths can you fit into an eighth? Well, you can't fit an entire fourth into an eighth because look, the fourth is twice as big. you can only get a half of the fourth in an eighth. That's why it came out to a half. So like I said, this may be just a simple way of, you're going to have to think a little bit differently about this. Now you might be saying, so why are you having to turn the fraction upside down? Why do you have to use a reciprocal? The reason is that when you're dividing, that it's asking you by the very nature of dividing to do the opposite of multiplying. You have to do the opposite. So when you do the opposite, you do the opposite of division, all right? And you have to make this inverted or flip it upside down. That's where you get the reciprocal. Once you get the idea, make the reciprocal and multiply it. Division of fractions will make a lot more sense. But it may take some practice. So let's say you got some word problems. How do you know when a word problem wants you to divide? Now it's easy when it says divide this, 1/4 divided by 5/6. That's easy. What if it's a word problem and it wants you to divide the fractions? How do you know it wants you to divide instead of say multiply? The question may ask how many are in this number? How many thirds, how many halves, how many tenths, etc. How many? It might say how many half-foot pieces of fabric could be cut from a 6 2/3 piece of cloth or fabric. In other words, you've got this big long piece. How many chunks could you get from that? It could be rope, it could be cloth, etc. Now, when you have a word problem and it's saying that somebody's going to share it. When something can be shared, like 7/8 of a pan of brownies or 3/4 of a pie or pizzas among friends or family members. If it says 4 family members shared 7/8 of a pan of brownies, how many brownies did each family member get? You know that when it says, when it's talking about how much can be shared, you know that you divide things up to share, especially when it's food. All right? Here's an example. How many, there's that how many again. How many green bean plants can fit in an 8 square yard garden if each of the plants needs 3/4 of a square yard? Every one of them needs its own little section. All right, so we've got 8 divided by 3/4. So we've got 8 square yard gardens, pretty good sized garden. And you're going to divide it up into little sections, 3/4 of a square yard each. All right, make the reciprocal and you'll multiply. Here's an extra step though. Also, we are going to have to make the whole number into a fraction. All right? Got to do it too. So we would say 8/1. Not just 8, but we've got to make it into a fraction. But we still have to show that it is 8 whole things. Now, you might say, well, why do we put it over 1? Well, remember that fractions can show division too. So 8 divided by 1, 8 divided by 1 is 8. So I've made it into a fraction, but it still shows 8 whole things, 8 entire things, not fractional small pieces, but a whole thing. Anytime you have to make a whole number into a fraction, you will place it over 1. All right, and then we'll do just like we normally would. We would say 8/1 times, we're going to make the reciprocal here of this, and we'll say 4/3. Now we're going to multiply just like you typically would. 8 times 4 is 32. 1 times 3 is 3. 32/3. I can't leave it like that. I need to put it in an improper fraction. I need to simplify it. So let's see, 32 divided by 3. 3 can be divided by 3 once. All right, bring down my 2. My 2, I tried to divide it. I couldn't. And, all right. So my answer is that 32/3 equals 10 2/3. So I can plant 10 bean plants, almost 11. If that was 3/3, I could plant 11, but I really can only fit 10 in there. But do I need to show the 2/3? Yes, I do. I need to show that I did try to divide that, and that's what's left over. So I can fit 10 2/3 bean plants in an 8 square yard garden. And each of the plants will get 3/4 of a square yard to grow. Here's our practice problems for tonight. We have 3 of them. Now, this one's easy enough, all right, because you know you're going to divide. Well, actually, what you're going to do is multiply, and you're going to turn this one into the reciprocal. Here, read it real carefully, and here. Think of what it is you're dividing. Are you dividing the third, or are you dividing the 2 cups? Read it real carefully and see how it is that you need to set the problem up. And we'll discuss it tomorrow in class, okay? Thanks.